Call the September 1st, 2022 Planning Commission meeting in session. Melissa, could you please do a roll call?
Yes, Chair Clow.
Yes, here.
Vice Chair Lawrence.
Here.
Secretary Smith. Commissioner Faulkner.
Here.
Commissioner Hinojos Ball. Commissioner Lucero.
Here.
Commissioner Mirando.
Here.
Commissioner Pava. Commissioner Toya.
Here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Commissioner Faulkner, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Next, we move to the approval of the agenda. Staff, do you have any changes to the agenda?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one clarification and one change. So we did add, with the amended agenda, we added the Midtown moving forward presentation. We have Lee Logston and I believe Daniel Hernandez here to give us that presentation tonight. And then on the findings of fact and conclusions of the law, case 2022-5064, 2200 Old Pecos Trail preliminary plat. There was a condition added by Dan to amend the findings to include a motion to require a note on the plat limiting the development to 1 story. So you all do need to make a motion to add that. I believe that's it. Thank you.
That amended findings of facts was emailed to you, so you should have all seen it.
Motion to approve as amended.
Second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Lawrence. Yes. Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner.
Yes.
Commissioner Lucero.
Yes.
Commissioner Mirando.
Yes.
Commissioner Pava.
Yes.
Commissioner Toya.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion has been approved.
Okay, next we move on to staff communications. Sorry, you're right. Next, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes, and they are the minutes from the August 4th, 2020 meeting. Are there any changes from staff to those minutes?
Madam Chair, we have no changes for the minutes for August 4th.
Any changes from the commission? We have a motion. Second? We have a roll call.
Commissioner Lawrence.
Yes.
Commissioner Smith. Yes. Commissioner Faulkner.
Yes.
Commissioner Lucero.
Yes.
Commissioner Mirando.
Yes.
Commissioner Pava. Yes. Commissioner Toya.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion has been approved.
Now we move on to staff communications. The first item on the agenda is transportation planning.
Good evening. Eric Ani with the Santa Fe Metropolitan Planning Organization. I'm sorry, who is the chair here tonight? Madam Cloud. I was just here last night presenting to the governing body a resolution that had been well in the works for complete streets. So I'm coming fresh off that. It was a tough meeting for the governing body last night with all that's going on. My presentation may be a little bit unusual. It was intended to be a little unusual. So I want to start off with my goal is in 15 minutes or so is to get a couple points across. And the first one is the context of the 1999 general Jason asked me to give a review of the Chapter 6 transportation, and I did. I wanted to share with you, in the context of considering, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity that the city is going to move forward with the new plan, is the intent of Chapter 6. Land policies have been designed to ensure that alternatives to automobile trips are encouraged by promoting compact form, providing neighborhood amenities, and then page 6-2, 6-1 streets, implementing a comprehensive strategy to decrease reliance on automobiles. Reduction in automobile dependence and dominance is a guide theme of this document. So I'll leave that there, 1999. So here we are in 2022. So the reason I have this slide up here is twofold. Number one is to think about what is transportation. There are some really cool children's books here that I read as a child of the 70s. Richard Scarry's Cars and Trucks and Things was influential on me. I grew up in the greater Detroit area, where I started driving when I was 2, and have continued to drive. That was a kind of a joke. The influence, I think, culturally, where we are today in 22 is overwhelming. And the challenge, and secondly, what is transportation? So what I want to focus on is not necessarily transportation in the global sense. What really impacts us today in the code, in the city, and that's mobility and accessibility. And what I mean by mobility and accessibility is really the movement of people through space is mobility. And then accessibility, which is getting to the right places at the right time. And what a conundrum, not only the city of Santa Fe, but across the nation that we put ourselves in by trying to do both and do both really well. And as a result, I would submit that we really don't do well each. So I want to go back a little bit further to 1937 when Norman Bell Getty wrote the quintessential Magic Highway book. If you haven't seen this book or read this book, it is phenomenal in terms of the prediction of the highway system that we have today, and even the highway systems that go through the city of Santa Fe. And then in 1958, our friend Walt Disney picked up on the theme almost verbatim from the book and created a 1-hour Sunday night Disney special called Magic Highway USA. There are a few images there. Norman Bell Getty partnered with our friends Ford, Chrysler, Chevrolet in 1939 for the World's Fair to show the world what the future of roadways will be. And what I would submit to you is when we drive out tonight and look out and drive on, whether it's a Cerritos, whether it's a St. Michael's, it started here, and they did well. So fast forward to a little planning context here in Santa Fe. Our friend Harlan Bartholomew was hired in 1947 to derive the then city plan. I am fascinated by this plan for a number of reasons. The number one reason is the influence that it has today. So, and the influence of Mr. Bartholomew across the nation at the time. His firm was the leading planning firm in comp plans across the nations for cities about this size. And I pick on him a little bit here, and I don't mean to be too harsh, but the intent of what the ethic that he brought into this plan was pretty clear that we see today. And it was the proposal of a highway that was right through the city downtown. And the way it was articulated, the way it was proposed to the city at the time, was an inconspicuous giant highway through downtown. Now, interestingly enough, in the city adopted the plans. This particular highway, which is Guadalupe Street, basically, and the irony, I think, today, and in a good way maybe, is Guadalupe Street is going under a road lane reduction. Hopefully, that construction will start this year after years of effort. So the spirit of the plan was really to open up Santa Fe for the automobile. And this is with the same year, what I call the Great Convergence, with roadway improvements and the visions of urban expressways through town, more grid, uniform, geometric design standards. And this is occurring across the nation. This is post-World War II, if you want to call it. Land use zoning ordinance passed April 16th, 1948. Hallelujah. The glory of zoning has brought us to where we are today in 2022. And not to be too harsh on zoning, but it really has been an influence as to where we are today. So I want to talk a little bit from here on, a little bit about human scale in cities. And what was the intent in 1947? And here we go back to maybe the turn of the century. I love this picture in terms of human scale, Santa Fe, the emergence of the automobile juxtaposed with the horse and buggy. Nice, another scale in terms of looking back in history, 1955, circa give or take. Really like these photos. It really gives a sense of where the city was in terms of urban form in the 50s and where we were going. Now, the pictures on the right are from today, and the scale is still there. It gives me hope that we can do this. So let's take a look at scale. Here we are in 1978 and circa 1980. The photo on your left is a somewhat freshly redesigned St. Michael's Avenue. And then the photo on the right I really like is downtown Santa Fe. The congestion and the image of the gentleman sort of helping the guy in the truck out is somewhat profound. So let's look at the trajectory here. Santa Fe, New Mexico population 2022, 91,417. I drew a little X mark about 1980. Now, in 1980, the population tipped over to 50,000 people. That was a then federal requirement for the MPO to become a reality. MPO, just for those of you who may be sitting here don't know who we really are, we are an independent organization, federally funded. We are comprised of the county, the city, the Pueblo of Tesuque, and the state of New Mexico. We have a policy board that is our governing body, and we are hosted by the city and city employees. There's myself and two really cool transportation planners, Leah Ingve and Hannah Burnham. So with that said, what was going on, I may ask, in terms of why, with a population of 50,000 on Earth, did the city build this thing in terms of scale? And going back to the picture of downtown. And it makes perfect sense. And here's we were using, again, the convergence of zoning. What you see on flanking this particular roadway is a result of zoning minimum parking standards, which we can talk about more later if you want. And the urban form, transforming to really a highly inefficient suburban form. And look at the projection of growth. So I talked to our travel demand modeler yesterday about this picture in 1978. The MPO's travel demand modeler, which predicts future growth in terms of travel, has been doing travel demand modeling for the city and the MPO for 30 years. So what he looked at here and said, okay, probably in 1970X, the city with the traffic engineering was using pretty much a specific growth rate. And then maybe looking back at the trajectory of growth over the last 5 years. And you can see by the projectile, it makes sense to what they built, because what they built was for today, 20, 30 years out. So another interesting, ironic thing about this is that for the last 15 years, and I've not been here that long, but I am aware of policies, projects, efforts by the city to redesign this road and have more of an urban human scale context. It is our hope that the city can actually do this. But my point for you tonight in terms of planning the future, why is it going to be extremely difficult to do? Is because we have ingrained and embedded in pretty much everything that you see become before you in terms of transportation planning, a linear regression, anticipating future growth nonstop, and the continued creation of this. And then we go to this today. This is an image from Google. Google is pretty good at keeping up to speed. And I'm not far from being finished here with my point. So Google's pretty, this is the, you can see the fire in the background. And then Rudy's restaurant is actually there. So this is probably within the last 6 months. Because this is now what we continue to build, and this is what we will continue to build forevermore, unless we make a conscious decision that this is not what we want. Now, being with the MPO and planning for the last 9 years in studies and transportations, and listening, most people don't want this in this community. They want walkability, human context in terms of scale. So I just offer you to think about, and the other thing about this too is if we look at it, the city of Santa Fe is now the proud owner of this creature. After 18 years of negotiations with the NMDOT, and is there any reason that the NMDOT didn't want to get rid of this thing? Here you go, city. Congratulations, it's ours. What are we going to do with it? So, no pressure, planning commission for this. I think that's going to be up to you. Okay, I'm just kidding. So what are the things that come with when you have roads of this nature? You have crashes, and Rios Road is the most deadly road in the city. The MTO just passed last week what is a local road safety plan. I won't go too much into it. It highlights the high injury network, which is not that difficult to predict, which is mostly our minor and major arterials. They're designed for both speed, mobility, volume, and accessibility. And again, they do poorly, in my mind, in terms of the metrics at both. Some contributing factors. Take a look and hover for a second. The map on your left is a gap analysis that we had done of sidewalks. Now, the periphery of Santa Fe, which is in the MPO area but within the county, it's understandable that the county is not building roadways with sidewalks. So if you largely ignore that red aspect and look at the city of Santa Fe, there's still a tremendous amount of roadways and areas and land use that just lack sidewalks. I think this goes in terms of going back to the 1947 plan, was the commitment to build mobility at the expense of this, walkability. And then another contributing factor that we cannot ignore is the percentage of commuters coming from our friends in Rio Rancho, Albuquerque, and Espanola, Los Alamos, a significant factor that we must contend with. The city has been embarked on a multimodal transition plan, which I can go into a lot depth later. I don't want to, but we will be bringing this before the governing body in the next couple months. As a result of this effort, of this understanding and recognition of where we've come in the last 50 years and where we want to go. The city or the MPO, as an example, in our bicycle master plan does have facility design recommendation toolkits that offer maybe Band-Aids, if you want to call that, to our roadways, but I would submit it one day Santa Fe will have a buffered or protected bike lane. Why we don't today is up to your imagination. So I conclude this presentation with a thought, is that the opportunity, not to be completely negative in it, is extraordinary for the city today. Ask the question, what do we want to be in 20 years? Now that is the essence of a comp plan. So when we go back to 1999 and we ask the question, my hope is that we don't do this, is that we draw an aspirational, feel-good Now, there were some good things in here, but feel-good strategy is reduction in automobile dependence and dominance, and the guiding theme of this document, without actually doing anything. So I would submit to this planning commission and my fellow colleagues that let's work together. It can't be the MPO. Sometimes we look crazy running around going, we ought to stop this madness. But look at it from a practical point of view and say, what can we do together to actually make a change? My hope is that the document actually has implementable and reasonable strategies that can say no. And one may be this. When you look at your your traffic impact studies, know this to be true. They are heavily biased towards suburban development. The traffic impact analysis that you often see rely on what is called the Manual for Access, MANN. It's an NMDOT giant document that is designed for highways. So that is one thing. The impact fee, the entire thing about the impact fees and how they're administered was based on a linear regression analysis that we were going to continue to build out roadways. So at a systemic level, there are so many things that we don't really look deeply into to say why. We're going back to 1947 with that ethic. Do we still want to do that? So I've run a little bit over. I hope this is a little informative in terms of the past of where we've come from, and then, where we can go in the future. And I have optimism with our following presentation that my experience working with the Midtown campus in the city is an example of doing the opposite of what I just presented. So there is hope. Thank you.
Any questions? Commissioner Pava?
Mr. Auni, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Mr. Auni, thank you for an excellent overview, concise overview of what's happened in the past 75 years where we've attempted to do urban planning in Santa Fe and resulted in what we now have. Just read the paper any day and you'll see the ills exposed, right? Toward that end, when I look at the map and I see Cerrillos Road extending 12 miles from the center of the city all the way practically to the airport and to where population centers are, can you and the MPO at some point advocate some kind of high-capacity transit, whether it be fixed rail, light rail, or, and I know it sounds absurd for a city the size of Santa Fe, but all over every place else on the planet this is done, at least high-capacity buses that are clean, safe, efficient, and punctual. I would think that a game changer would be something like that to mold urban development. What are your comments?
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, it's an excellent point. So in 2015, the MPO worked with the transit agencies for a public transit master plan. And in that, there was a contemplation of maybe taking Cerrillos Road to a different level. And to be candid with you at this stage, the way things are set up systemically, to bring up anything like light rail or bus rapid transit is somewhat political suicide. It doesn't resonate with this community, and I can't say why. It's just that it seems like we would be on the edge of foolishness for doing so until we recognize that, oh, maybe that could actually be a big thing and a good thing. But it's really difficult right now to even talk about it when, again, we have the systemic and the continued growth and development of Cerrillos Road. So to that point, the NMDOT is scheduling about $35 million, and by the end of the day, it'll probably be closer to $50 million to redesign Cerrillos from St. Mike's to St. Francis. In that, the City of Santa Fe Public Works and the MPO have partnered to try to at least have some dialogue about speed design, and we've made some successful headways with the DOT, because it's ultimately going to be the city's road that they consider greater pedestrian, bicycle, and unfortunately not transit, really, but there will be better stops. So I think we're a few years out for that conversation to be had. Otherwise, I would invite somebody else to try. Sorry.
Thank you for your response. It reminds me of Einstein's definition of insanity. Not your response, but what Einstein, to paraphrase, what the good scientist, physicist said was, keep doing the same things and expecting different results is the definition of insanity.
Yeah, well, I've been called worse, so it's all good.
Commissioner Faulkner?
So when you were talking about what we use to measure traffic studies, is there different format or formula or measurements that could be used that would, like right now, that would better represent what's happening than what's being used?
Excellent question, Madam Chair, Commissioners. In fact, just recently, myself and planning staff had a really critical conversation with traffic engineer Leroy Pacheco about that very issue, including how we use level of service and have used level of service for decades to be sort of a measuring stick for roadway capacity, and really rethinking how we can do that. The answer was difficult. And here's why it's difficult, is that it would be, and I think we ought to do it, I think the city is to come up with our own guidelines, our own design standards, and our own metrics that recognize the difference between highway standards, which is unapologetically what the NMDOT has. That's what they have, is to find something that is going to be in the spirit of what the city of Santa Fe wants. We can do this. It's going to take money, resources, and time to actually create that. Why haven't we? Well, it's easy to use the DOT standards because we don't, anyway, it's easier not to do this work.
One thing that I found is we keep using this measurement that you're talking about, and yet parking and traffic are consistently like some of the top two things where the community feels, and I feel as a commissioner, how we're measuring traffic counts doesn't reflect what's actually happening on the ground, like what's happening in reality. And so that's why I wanted to ask the question, because since I've been on the commission, I've questioned the percentages that are being used, if those are accurate, like the percentage of growth that's being calculated for. Does every household only really have 2 cars? I have not found that to be true in my district at all. Most houses have 5. And so that's the kind of stuff that I don't think is being captured in the traffic studies we're doing now. And so that, I just was wondering if there's something we could apply now that could maybe make a difference in how we perceive traffic and traffic count.
Madam Chair, the MPO is responsible for traffic counts with the NMDOT with permanent counts. We have trends analysis over time. We look at it more of a globally than you look at it maybe more in the microscopic element of the development. We invested in what's called streetlight data about a year ago. What's streetlight data? Streetlight data is if you have a mobile phone, it is a scrubbing of mobile phone data to actually show us what's really going on. We did a short study that, oh, Leroy's here. Hey, cool. Yeah. We did a short study that looked at where people are going, trip, destination, origin, and the like, and found that by looking at pedestrian movements, bicycle movements outside of just the automobile, it drew a much broader picture of the movements through space. This was expensive, and so we're hoping that as costs go down for this data, we'll have a new era of traffic volume and traffic count opportunities. So sometimes the studies might be not sure what resources they go through. There isn't a whole lot. But there's kind of a myth behind traffic volumes, too, is what we deciphered from an analysis in 2020 was that traffic volumes were actually decreasing, and for a number of reasons, not by a lot, but it seems improbable that traffic volumes in many of these particular areas would be decreasing, again, based on the linear progression in thought over the last 50 years. It's a factual component. And then 2020 mixed everything up. And so we're trying to get back on track with 2022 data.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I'm Leroy Pacheco. The city's Public Works Department contracts out its traffic engineering review for the development review team. Traffic engineering is an engineering discipline, and it requires a licensed engineer to apply at least American standards of traffic engineering to the analysis. And it's not only couched in engineering principles, but also U.S. law. We use and refer to the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. It's connected. I mean, I don't know how many automobiles are on the road every day, but I would say hundreds of thousands travel through the city. Each of these carrying liability insurance with respect to the automobile, with respect to the lives inside the automobile. There are only 3 jurisdictions inside the state of New Mexico that have developed their own criteria different from the DOT's State Access Management Manual. They all use the same traffic engineering discipline principles. I believe one of them actually even refers to the SAM. We call it the SAM. So I don't want to leave thinking we don't know what we're doing, and so many smaller towns, smaller communities would go through the same procedures and ways of looking at traffic operations. The engineers are not designing the environments. We're responding and analyzing what is put before us and how it will operate and impact the traffic engineering networks that we're looking at. We look at levels of service, delay, impacts to pedestrians, bicyclists. Obviously, the automobile motorized traffic is the largest percentage of traffic carrying the impacts and the risks. So I just don't want us to leave with the impression that the city is doing something arbitrary. We try to apply the same principles consistently to every developer coming through the system, and we will work with the DRT team to move toward a system if we need to that's independent of the State Access Management Manual. It's not easy, and my last recommendation to the team was that they include engineers in that process. Thank you.
Commissioner Smith.
At the risk of embarrassing myself, I have no idea the consequences of what you just said, sir, other than we don't know what we're doing. We do know what we're doing. It isn't working, and we don't have a plan going forward that will do anything different. If there are 3 communities that are doing something different, which ones are they, and what are they doing differently, and what are the axioms they're using? Or maybe I'm just not familiar with the language, but I would not be telling you the truth if I told you I understood the significance of what you just said, other than it ain't great. We're going to keep doing the same stuff. I believe in the integrity you're talking about. What I don't understand are the consequences.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Smith, I wasn't implying anybody didn't know what they were doing, so if I somehow implied that, my apologies. The communities that have their own processes that traffic engineering developers would use, City of Albuquerque, Bernalillo County, and City of Las Cruces. I believe Las Cruces also refers to the state's SAM, State Access Management Manual. They're all based in traffic engineering design principles, and they all use the same engineering principles that require you to have a license to do that work. So no one's using anything different. It's just that the go-to manual for those three independent communities have developed their own methodologies to use those universal principles. So that is the only difference. And so because many other communities don't have that, we refer to the state's access management manual. They're the biggest dinosaur in the room, so to speak, for funding, for planning. I believe they, in a certain sense, house the MPO within the cities. So they are the largest resource for all of us, they being the New Mexico Department of Transportation. They're sort of the mother of all the traffic that runs through the state. So it's it's a big player, and in Public Works we use their design standards, their specifications. It's not unique that the DOT's developed processes benefit a lot smaller communities throughout the state. That's just standard. That's a given. And so I'm trying to unpaint what I thought was a negative picture Eric was painting, that we the traffic engineers are using arbitrary criteria. That's not. I wanted to give you confidence in the traffic engineering review the city's Public Works Department is giving you. That was my intention. I'm an unprofessional speaker with, I'm totally unprepared to do this, so here I am speaking off the cuff. And I offended people.
I apologize if I overspoke, because I was not intending to question your credibility at all. What I was trying to question is I don't know where it leaves us, other than we have a pessimistic view of where we've come from and where we're going, and the definition of insanity of continuing to do the same thing. And then we have you essentially confirming that.
Excuse me, Madam Chair and Sir Smith. I was actually intending to not confirm it. I was actually hopefully being to very gently kick Eric to the curb. I think that the processes we're using are fine, and until we determine that there's something independent the city wants to do, which will take a lot of work, we'll go there. But I don't think that
I thought you were confirming his pessimism. By kicking him to the curb,
it was a gentle kick. No, and I apologize to Eric as well. I just mean, I felt like he was being a little bit dark about the processes that Public Works provides, and I don't think they're as bad as the impression you may have been left with. They are professional. They're being done per a criteria that is not terribly bleak. I mean, I don't think we might have our own manuals, but I don't think, and I think the point I would leave with that we don't have control over is I don't design anything. I don't say this should be a transit center, this should be a highway. The traffic engineers are looking at the impacts to the network for what's being proposed. And so there's lines, we don't have any sense of what the politics is, what the popularity might be, and it's just, here's the traffic engineering models, and this is what they're going to do. So I think to Eric's defense, they're looking at design, aesthetics, those sorts of things that we're looking at now and a 10-year horizon impact, and is this going to be developed within a reasonable level of service? So there's a distinction between the engineering and the planning. It's somewhat tense.
Yes, Madam Chair, one more. I understand what you're saying. I've only been here for a few months. Virtually every major decision we have to make is fraught with traffic problems, and we are told it's going to be okay. And that is something we take on faith or not, depending on the situation and whoever is voting, and how they're feeling about the general point of the project. Is there any lesson in Albuquerque or Bernalillo or Las Cruces that we could benefit from? And then I'll be quiet and let us all off the whatever.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Smith, I can't answer that with any credibility with respect to, other than I've driven through Albuquerque and Las Cruces and Bernalillo County. I don't know how their commissions work.
We haven't studied them or tried to learn from them.
Me?
Well, us.
Us.
Let me ask a clarifying question. As I understand it, those three cities, they don't use the DOT manual. They sort of have their own manual, but in terms of the substance is fairly, they end up in the same place pretty much? The substance is pretty much the same?
Madam Chair, traffic engineering criteria and design criteria, looking at where it is universal. I mean, it's, at least in the country. I don't know what they're doing in Europe, but, you know, it's a licensing system. They would be speaking the same language, which is why it feels the same if you drive across into Arizona, Colorado, Texas, besides the pavement. You know, so they have the handbooks and we don't have one yet. But I believe that land use is aware of that, and we can work with them to figure that out.
So they don't necessarily come up with a different solution to similar problems that we're facing in Santa Fe. They just use a different handbook, essentially.
I hate to call it a handbook.
Or
perhaps, I mean, really, I don't want to call anyone to the, but, you know, the traffic engineers who go throughout the state might be able to answer that better than I, because we're just in Santa Fe, but the engineering principles are universal.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to point out, like, I appreciate Eric's presentation and the conversation with Mr. Pacheco. I think these ideas aren't mutually exclusive. It feels like, you know, Leroy is speaking to, you know, the current situation and how we're managing that, and Eric is looking to the future. I just wanted to make that point.
Understand. Any other questions? Shall we move on to the Midtown moving forward?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. It's a pleasure to be standing in front of you again. It's been a little while. I'm Lee Logston, the Asset Development Manager for the Midtown project, and working now not in land use anymore, but the Economic Development Department. I don't want to steal too much thunder from the presentation that Daniel Hernandez has put together for this. He will be, or he has joined us by Zoom, and he will be actually giving the main presentation here. But Jason wanted just for me to introduce him and what we're doing here tonight. We are pleased to be in a position now where, after many years of effort and planning and input from the community and direction from the governing body, we are actually moving forward with the Midtown redevelopment plans, specifically the land development plan, excuse me, and associated applications have been turned into the land use office as of last Monday. The land use department and all of our other departments that review these things are in their review process right now, and we are pleased to say that if all goes well, we will be in front of you with the land use applications on October 6th. The presentation tonight largely deals with the community development plan, which will actually not be something that you make a decision on. The governing body will do that alone, but we wanted to keep you in the loop with that. But again, if I don't see you before, I'll be seeing you on October 6th to present the various land use applications related to that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Daniel Hernandez, who will be giving a presentation.
Daniel, we can't hear you. Can you?
Yeah, I don't know why.
We got you. We can hear you now.
Will Lee be doing the slides there in person, or should I do my share screen?
We can do it either way, but if you're able to share screen right now, that's about the
Okay,
easiest.
I'll do that.
Okay.
Sure.
Daniel, it's Maggie. I think you should be able to share your screen. So.
Yeah, I found it just now.
Okay, great.
Good evening. I'm here with my colleagues Lee and Alexandra Ladd. We actually worked together on giving this presentation within the Office of Economic Development. And we wanted to make a presentation to you early in this process before we actually present the land, the master plan and the zoning to you later in the year in October. Because there are two complementary plans coming together that will guide and regulate development Midtown. Tonight is going to focus on the community development plan, which is, again, not a land regulating document, but more of a public policy guiding document. So we wanted to have this chance to present that to you so you can sort of understand how it relates to the land plans that you will be reviewing and making recommendations for approval on later in October. So just one step back, early in the year, the Office of Economic Development, Rich Brown presented, which ultimately became a resolution around a series of actions that the city would take to move the redevelopment of Midtown forward. Here you see a list, I won't read them all, but there were a series of interrelated actions so that we can arrive at where we are really today. And I think in here you see two sections in here, reuse of existing buildings and Garson Studios. Both of those are requests for proposals are due to go out any day now. We're waiting for approvals on the drafting of them, and we will get those out on the street. The other ones are related to, lack of better words, I'm sure as planning commissioners you understand the difference between horizontal development versus vertical development. We're preparing the site for vertical development. So in some circles of the industry of development, it's called horizontal development, meaning we're working on the approvals, understanding the infrastructure to support the type of development we want to see at Midtown, and any other regulatory requirements we have so that we can actually develop the types of uses that people have stated they want to see at Midtown. So here's a really big, broad scope timeline in which we've been planning. I'm sort of taking it back. I mean, if you really think about it, we started in 2018 when the city took control from the previous private university that closed its doors. We were then responsible and in control of figuring out what to do with the land. But this past year was actually a really important phase. So immediately we went into concept planning. What is the vision for the site? That early work really guided our current phase where we are right now, which is in the planning phase. And we're about to end the planning phase with the approvals that are coming up in the fall. But last summer we had some listening sessions. They were facilitated by planners. And then in the fall we had workshops. They were facilitated by planners as well as our Midtown engagement partners, which were local organizations that hosted events. And a big event in the fall was the Midtown Block Party, which brought out many families and people from neighborhoods that we typically don't see in public policy forums. So it was a very exciting moment. A lot of that, it took time to actually aggregate that information and further inform the plans. And we are now entering in that phase where the plans are now public. They're on our website, and I'll give you the name of the website in a little while. And then we had the early neighborhood notification meeting. So we are in that stretch of getting to the approvals. Again, I reiterated some of these things that I just talked about, what that process looked like over the past few years. And this actually articulates that it started even earlier than the 2018 moment when we took control of the land, but 2016, because the Midtown site is within the Midtown Link overlay, and that Midtown Link overlay influenced and guided a lot of the planning work that we did within the master plan. and the zoning. So again, there will be two land development plans that the governing body will hear. One is land development plan, which is the master plan and the zoning, that you will hear, comment, and review. And then the community development plan will go to the governing body at the same time as the land development plan, so that everyone understands how they are interconnected. So tonight, again, we'll talk more about what that interconnected looks like. Land development plan being the master plan and the zoning primarily. There's some zoning ordinance amendments as well, and a link tweak ordinance as well that will happen during that same review period. But those are regulatory issues that will dictate legally what can be built, what can happen on that land from a land use perspective. The community development plan was one that we heard from the community, like, we don't really care about curb heights, we don't care about setbacks. Well, yeah, we kind of do, but what we're really interested in, what are opportunities for public programming for arts and culture? What are the access to jobs? What jobs are going to be created, and how do we find out about them and get access to them? So again, not land use, but the land use has an implication on these community goals and the things we've heard from people over the past several years. So here is the process by which we are following. Again, on July 14th was the early neighborhood notification meeting. We have answered, I can't remember, I mean, it's like close to 80 questions. They are posted in English and Spanish on the website, as well as the ENN guidelines, our responses to the several questions, the standard questions that the Land Use Office has applicants to respond to. They're also in English and Spanish on the website. And the land development plan, meaning the master plan and the zoning ordinance information, are all posted on the website as well, so that people can see them. And the application was due August 22nd, and through Lee's leadership, we were able to get that application in on time. And again, we'll be coming to you for a review and a hearing on October 6th. And then after you make your recommendation, that will then go to the governing body in early November. So we're targeting November 9. We know that politics moves dates around, but we want to keep the process moving because people in the city have said, when is something going to happen? And we're telling, and our response is, as soon as we get the entitlements, the approvals, we can then go into the implementation phase. So you will be looking at a master plan. This is a high level. There's a lot of detail in the document that's posted on the website. This is generally a master plan that articulates not day one of what development will look like, but the future. It talks about connectivity, connection to the surrounding city and neighborhoods, Central Plaza, the sites that will be created for development, as well as the buildings that will remain on site, the existing buildings that we intend to reuse for development. So again, you know this better than anyone as commissioners, planning commissioners, but for the public, and this is also posted on the website, to try to inform and educate people around what is a master plan and what does it do. When you look at the master plan and when you're reviewing it for the hearing, it has the street networks, it has parcel layouts and block patterns, it has design guidelines for height limitations and setback requirements, and it provides the framework basically for the kinds of development that could happen. We intentionally left the land development plan flexible so that it can respond to future markets and future public policy and community development goals that people want to see. Meaning it's not the kind of plan that you may have seen in the early 2000s or the 1990s, which was sort of the type of plan that new urbanists were developing, where on a corner you would say that building has to do this many floors with a tower, it has to have a clock in it. So that is not the plan we wanted to develop, because we wanted it to be flexible for future decisions to be made and to be responsive to the development marketplace, and again, like I was saying, to public and community goals. So the community development plan. We posted it on the 15th of August. We are making these series of presentations to different city council committees and commissions, including you tonight. We will be doing a similar introductory presentation to the governing body at the end of September. We'll go to the Economic Development Advisory Committee, and at that moment is when we can actually begin showing both the plan and the land plan, because it will be past October 6th when you would have heard it. We'll be presenting also to the Finance Committee, and then ultimately, again, the two plans come together at the governing body hearing on November 9th. So, Community Development Plan. First, again, it's not the type of legal regulatory document. It will be effective based on a resolution passed by the City Council. And it is a policy document that really responds to what people voiced as their objectives for the future of Midtown. And as you can imagine, they're not always clearly quantitative. They're often qualitative about the type of environment that people want to experience. And relating back to Eric's presentation previously, the type of places that people want, walkability, a feeling of safety, people first in urban environments. So we organized the community development plan along the standards of sustainable development, equity, environment, economic, but there was a lot of stuff that people talked about the culture of Santa Fe. So we created a fourth sustainability category called culture, and I'll go through these and what's generally included in each of them. Again, since it's not regulated, the city controls the land. So we will be able to issue RFPs that preference, prioritize, or require developers to actually respond to these community policies, these public policies that people want to see. So that, again, since we're in control, we write the RFPs, we're able to evaluate the responses based on the responders' ability or desire and capacity to achieve some of these community policy goals. So I'll start out with equity. It deals mostly with affordability and the ability for people to live in Santa Fe. So it talks a lot about housing affordability. It outlines the number of units that will be built, and of the percentage and the number of units that will be affordable, meaning they will have price restrictions targeting specific household incomes, so that we have a spectrum of housing that will be affordable to a wide variety of families, not only by income, but by family size. By family size. So we're also going to be proposing different parcels for different tenures, meaning we want to see ownership, fee simple ownership, we want to see rental units, and we want to see land trusts. So sort of a cooperative type of living and ownership structure through a land trust. So we'll be issuing RFPs to address those different pieces of the puzzle and housing choices within the city of Santa Fe. We also want to send out a clear message that we want to strengthen our local capacity to do the kind of community-oriented development that people want to see at Midtown. So we will encourage partnerships between local nonprofit organizations or local developers, builders, with builders who bring capacity to be able to implement projects, so that we begin building a track record with them, a portfolio of projects, completed projects, so they can become more competitive in securing financing to build more and more complex projects. And then finally, the city is committing to supporting a neighborhood stabilization plan. We were being asked to think about the effects, the impacts of new development on the surrounding neighborhoods and what that might look like and what the city might do to help stabilize those neighborhoods to prevent displacement and to manage the effects of gentrification. So the city is committing to creating a neighborhood stabilization plan. We're looking at a future fiscal year to budget that so that we undertake that in partnership with community organizations. We learned a lot during this process of the value that working with community organizations brings. They bring their constituents, and they help facilitate the process versus us being in charge of actually facilitating everything and getting the same people back. We found out through our public engagement process with our Midtown partners was great value in being able to reach out to constituents that typically don't participate in public policy forums like planning. So we're excited about moving forward with that as one of the equity builders in the city overall. The next piece of the community development plan is on the environment. That focuses on the what you'll see in the master plan, and a lot of what Eric talked about walkability, open space, community gardens, just everything, the quality of life that people wanted to see, and how we can create streets that are for in anticipation of multimodal connectivity and mobility for people, for pedestrians, people and bicycles, as well as the safety of automobile traffic as well. We use the link overlay to increase or inform the plan so that the link broader Midtown district was a comprehensive whole and not just a fragmented, like here's the site and here's these surrounding sites, but how we can actually make a place that feels bigger than just the city-owned Midtown site. I think most importantly is we were led by the USGBC LEAD Neighborhood Development Program. We use it as a guide to make decisions and or strengthen decisions that we are already making so that we can comply with a series of credits. The LEAD certification checklist will be part of the community development plan as an exhibit to ones that we meet within the master plan itself as a regulatory document, but also ones that we will facilitate their implementation through the RFP process. So that will be an exhibit in the community development plan as well. Again, the land plan looked at all of the uses that people articulated. We reiterated in the community development plan so that there's clear relationship between this is what people said they wanted as a goal, and here's how it then gets implemented as a land use requirement allowance within the zoning and master plan. The next chapter was on economy. We focused on economic development. It wasn't just about creating jobs or finding new businesses, but it was also about making sure that those jobs were for local residents, whether through training, through ways that notifications for new jobs were available, how you find out about them, where you go to access the applications or interview process, whatever it is, so that it wasn't just a new business coming on board, but that new business had responsibilities of informing local residents how they can access jobs there. The community development plan lists a series of economic businesses that we want to promote. Probably the biggest one that you know, which is also one of the RFPs that will be going out the door, is the expansion of the existing rear Garson film production studio lot. And we are increasing the amount of space for expanding studio production in Santa Fe. Again, it also talks about ways that when we submit an RFP, particularly for mixed-use buildings, ways that we want to see small local businesses occupying those downstairs spaces, and ways that they might think about making some space affordable for new businesses to at least start up. We are also proposing a live-work unit typology so that people can be in their units all day long, which contributes to pedestrian and eyes on the street. So we also want to make sure that we have it whether we're facilitating live-work development as well. RFPs, we've been asked also that RFPs encourage different types of daycare centers, really. So I've listed a few here that we heard during the process that people would like to see in the mixed-use buildings when we send out RFPs. And then finally, the chapter on culture. So one of the big RFPs that we will be getting out soon as well is reusing the existing Legaretta Visual Arts Center as an arts hub. But it's just not an arts hub I'll say it another way. It's an art hub that strengthens and stabilizes community arts and culture. That was a huge focus, that people wanted to make sure that Midtown was for Santa Fe. It was for Santa Fe arts and culture. It was built on the ethos of arts and culture in Santa Fe. So we want to make sure that the RFP articulates that vision about stabilization and strengthening community arts in Santa Fe. There's a lot of discussion in the community development plan about public programming and ways that community organizations will program public space so that everything from theater night, to powwows, to community concerts, are part of life at the Future of Midtown. Again, these are the different types of big activities that happened over the course of the years that help inform these plans. There was at the end of the different designs that came out and the public forums that happened in 2018, there's a Midtown Campus Project final report that was written, and it is posted on the site. Our Midtown engagement partners wrote a report that is also on the website. It was completed in April this year. And they're still planning various activities through a stipend program that the city has so that community and civic organizations can apply for small funds for stipends to defray costs for their forums, to educate, inform, hear back from people. Are these plans on the right track? Is this consistent with what we've heard over the past few years? And to get that information back to us. Now, Alexandra can talk a little bit more about that. She's been leading that effort with the Midtown Engagement Partners and other civic organizations. There's the website about the stipend programs, and again, on that website you can access tons of information, historical information about all the planning efforts, Midtown resolutions, plans that have informed the current Midtown plans, and then all of the early neighborhood notification, the application, lots of stuff is on there. So I encourage you to visit the Midtown District Santa Fe.org website. So thank you for indulging this conversation, this presentation, and Andrea, Lee, and I are here. Alexandra, Lee, and I are here to respond to any questions you may have. I'll stop share.
Question? Commissioner Faulkner?
So in 2019, there was a bidding process for, I guess it was a request for interest, or it was put in some format that wasn't binding, from what I could understand. What happened to all the information that was gathered from the developers that bid for that?
So it was called a request for expressions of interest, which is actually a well-known or standard sort of form of when a piece of property when there's a lot of information that the issuer doesn't have about the property. We wanted to identify development firms, who would either have an interest in developing at some future point, or a master developer who wanted to develop all of it and go through a process with it of discovery. That closed down when we entered into an exclusive negotiating agreement with the developer. They were selected because they had a slew of local developers and community organizations on their team. That was probably their strongest point. They also had the financial capacity and a plan, completely conceptual, that they put forward as a starting point. All of those plans, none of them were informed by what our current plan is, which is about infrastructure, more about what community wants to see at Midtown, as well as all of the work with the different departments within the city to put an informed plan together. So again, conceptual at best. We looked at all those plans when we were reviewing the RFPs. Our master planning consultants organized all of those plans into the pros and cons, what they achieved, development, the types of development that was predominant versus open space, and everything in between. So we were able to evaluate those plans, informed this plan, as well as lots of other information that people have given us over the years. So they're important as a part of that toolbox of documentation that we still use.
That's what I was wondering, because I think that like 5 developers bid.
I think there was, it was around 5. I'll look right now if you want a number.
I don't need to know the exact number. I just was wondering, like, that whole process. I know 2 of us on the commission actually were working with 2 of the developers, and there was a lot of information that the developers presented. I mean, these are huge binders, and then I was just wondering if it was useful at all, the process.
Yes, I think that the most useful process we found, particularly when we were in the exclusive negotiation process, is what makes Midtown tough from a development perspective, and that what would make it more feasible from a developer's perspective, and what are the risks that they are not willing to take. And so that's why we undertook those 9 initiatives that the Office of Economic did, which was to really, they felt the most challenging part of redeveloping the site was getting approvals, land use approvals. It was informed through a community process as well as through the technical elements, particularly around engineering, around infrastructure. They felt that that was an elusive and unclear process that they felt was too risky. The other thing that was probably the most important was, we were negotiating with them right during the beginnings of COVID. So the financial markets were really unclear to them, and basically their portfolio investors were like, this may not be the right time to be embarking on a project that has too many unknowns.
So one of the things that I found most interesting in working on one of those bids was that we met with tons of community members. So we met with like the UNM's lead team for development. We met with community college. We met with I think every nonprofit in Santa Fe. And there was a lot of, at one point we got them all together in a room, and there seems to be, as far as programming goes, at least at the time we did these interviews, that they wanted intersectional programming. They wanted to make sure that whatever programs were there, that it was designed in such a way through programming and through facilities, like the build out of the project, that these program providers could work off of each other. So they weren't siloed on the property. Does that make sense? I don't know, I just remember that stood out to me, that they really wanted to all work together. They didn't.
Yeah.
And the community people we interviewed as well had the same, what you're saying in this is what we found to be true as well. That the community really cares more about what's going on programming-wise on that property than what the property necessarily looks like.
Yeah, that's helpful and reinforcing at the same time.
Other questions? Commissioner Smith?
I inferred from something you said, sir, that there's harmony between the link, which was done several years ago, and what you're bringing forward to the governing body. That the two are aware of each other, and I call it harmonized. Is that a fair inference?
Yeah, we use consistency, harmonized. That's both. I think that it describes it well.
Thank you. And is there an assumption about the long-term underlying ownership of the land? Obviously, the city owns it now, and I saw the words for sale or sell, or some version of that in your presentation. But are there assumptions about long-term ownership?
Yes. The RFPs have a statement in there that the city would prefer the sale of the parcels, that they would prefer the sale of the parcels, but they would consider a long-term ground lease if it benefited the city and the implementation of the project. So, as you probably know, ground leases are hard to finance development on, and so anyway, we wanted to communicate that we would prefer a sale, but we would consider it if it benefited the city in the long run.
That's very helpful, and thank you. When it comes to affordable and stable housing prices, underlying ownership can help despite the problems to get to it. But anyway, that's for another day. Thank you very much, and I want to thank the staff for bringing this. It's really helpful.
Commissioner Papa?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really great presentation and enlightening and summarizing what all has happened in the last several years. I really thank both Lee and Daniel for doing that. A couple of questions come to mind regarding if and when business case scenarios have been performed or will be performed. Question number one.
business case, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what that means.
When you look at the proposed land uses that we're going to see in the near future and council will see, are there numbers connected with these to explain why what we're seeing laid out, and not just something to back up what the public or many publics are wishing for?
I believe I understand the question. Yes. The master planning team included a land economics team, a group, and they will be presenting the economics of land development, land valuation, probably the two more important things from your perspective, I think, to your question. So it will outline a model based on the development program, both commercial and residential and film, and then some, community uses like public library. It will outline the land values associated with those different uses and how over a period of time, based on a projected development phasing, how income will come into the city and what the land values will look like and be influenced. They are also working and will be presenting Midtown today. There's a lot of misperceptions about Midtown just sitting there idle, and it's a huge operating cost burden when there's actually income coming into the city. So we want to at least kind of begin informing people about, yes, there is payment going out the door, but there's also some income. And we want to just sort of outline what Midtown looks like today so that we can then just paint a picture of what it looks like over time.
Thank you. That does address my question. I think we were just using different terms. Thank you, Daniel. With regard to the process of approval of the Planning Commission and governing body, and then subsequently, if and when this is approved, what's the role of the Planning Commission in subsequent parcel-by-parcel reviews? What is anticipated? Do we have some review authority? I've heard things about delegating to staff and whatnot, and I'd like some more clarification about that.
Sure. Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Commissioner Pava, the way the link ordinance is written right now, there is a thing called a qualifying residential project, and those can be subject to land director or land use director approval, meaning staff administrative approval. And so right now there is still that option. If a project is not a qualifying project, if it's a more commercial type project that doesn't have a residential component, that would come to you in the form of a development plan. I don't know if Jason or Pat has anything to say in addition.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I'd just like to add that there are plenty of projects now that don't come before the Planning Commission. If you want to build a single-family house on a single-family lot with no variances, it doesn't come before the Planning Commission. So, there might be plenty of projects at Midtown that would not need to come to the Planning Commission just because they don't need a variance, they don't need a development plan, they don't necessarily need a master plan. I'm not sure how many of those would be, but there will probably be some, even without this link exception.
If I can add, members of the Commission, so on the one hand, that could be viewed as lack of public input, public review, but I do want to state that part of the RFP process is that we are going to form and Daniel can correct me if I'm not saying this properly, but there will be a community review committee, I'm not using the right name, that will be able to have input on specific requests for proposals that the city goes out, so for affordable housing, for a variety of things. So it is our intent to keep people, the residents of the city, generally involved, members of the community throughout all these processes. So when RFPs are issued, there will be visibility there, and then also as they move forward. I don't know if, Daniel, you want to improve on what I said or add to it?
Yeah, either Alex or I can speak to this. We worked on this just again recently, but yes, we intend to create community advisory boards, a community advisory board that will participate in various elements of the implementation. One would be the RFP phase, so that we hear their voices. about, responses that we get and how different developers may have met their objectives. So they'll be participating in that process, as well as in the programming. So what types of things did we see last year that we want to see this coming year, and what's working, what's bringing people to Midtown, so that they have a continual planning voice and programming voice at Midtown.
Can you give some examples following on that question? There must be some examples you've studied around the country where this approach or something very similar to this has been tried and true. Can you name some communities or cities to give us a better idea and inspiration as to how this works?
Yes. One in particular that it's been really effective, and I was recently talking to them, that's why I know them, that's why it came to mind. But in San Francisco, in south of Market, the Yerba Buena Gardens Arts District so when they were completely redoing south of Market, which was really, in need of redevelopment at some point, but now it's completely different, transformed. But community groups are part of the community advisory group that basically everyone knows, like, we can't do that because we got to talk to them first. So they've been really effective at creating a great place in Yerba Buena Gardens, and in particular that park that sits in the middle of the district.
Well, as a native San Franciscan, I can appreciate that if it works in San Francisco, it might work in the other city of St. Francis. I don't know yet, but thank you for that illustration. Final question, is there an opportunity to coordinate what you're doing here with the proposed innovation overlay zones that have been talked about around the city? I'll address it to staff in general. It seems like there's a lot of overlap in similarities in what we're trying to accomplish. Not specific to Midtown, but in other areas where the commission has had some initial case reviews.
I'll leave that to Jason. I mean,
I will admit that I missed the first part of your question because I thought I was getting a critical email and it wasn't critical.
So a while back, we were proposed with this ordinance for a proposed innovation zone, and it was going to be down near Solera, and it's an interesting idea and concept. And Midtown, in and of itself, seems to have some similarities with what you're trying to propose. I would imagine economic development, housing, and all those good things, affordability, a mix of housing types and densities. And I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity. I don't want to stymie or stop anything, but has staff given any thought to how there's some cross-pollination with the proposed innovation zone, if it's even alive at this point, and what Midtown's doing, or is that just a non sequitur?
Lee, I think I can respond. This is part of I think goes back to one of the first questions about the ways that we were informed by the respondents to the RFBI. Some of them, I think, that you may be mentioning did respond to the RFBI as well. We want to reconnect with them. I mean, COVID just made everything such a question around commercial development and getting financing for it, let alone tenancy. We want to go back to people who responded, particularly in those innovation types of districts that they were proposing, and talk to them about their interest in Midtown. Now that we've gotten over a huge hurdle, which is to get approvals to allow the kinds of things they want to see to happen there, it will be a huge way to re-engage with them on their proposals around the innovation type ideas there.
And Madam Chair, if I could also add to what Daniel's saying, I think one of the big differences is that we're really looking at Midtown as opening up opportunity. So whether it's housing opportunity or recreational opportunity or job employment opportunities or entrepreneurial opportunities, that's kind of the lens through which the community, when we did all of this engagement with the Midtown Engagement Partners and UNM, that's what we heard. We heard people wanted a place to gather. They wanted a place where they could have opportunity, all different kinds of opportunity. And I think innovation fits into that lens really well. And it's probably a little early to know exactly what that looks like. But I appreciate you bringing that up. And these are some of the ways in which being in a small town is helpful, because it's not as though you can do something completely without influence or impact on another part of town. But I think, to your point, we should really make sure that we are being deliberate about that connection.
Thank you for the clarifications, Alexandra and Daniel and Lee. What comes to my mind is when the request for ideas, it wasn't really proposals, when it came out, Lanel, for example, actually was the Department of Energy applied. And, that could happen in the future. So I just bring this up because it's an opportunity and possibly a challenge. It's an economic driver. It can make a business case for it. How does it affect all the other goals and aspirations? But it's a reality with the budget increasing by $2 billion in the last 2 years, and all those people needing housing and officing, which is already happening in Santa Fe. That's why I bring it up.
If I may, and I'll end there, but I love this comment. It's a reminder of emphasizing certain things. I mean, it's a draft community development plan, so having these meetings is actually helping me to think, like, make that a stronger point. But this notion about revisiting some of these RFPs and these people who are proposing innovation types of uses, we should go back to them.
Commissioner Lawrence?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to ask a little bit more, building on Commissioner Pava's question. I'm processing the idea of implementing this in large part via RFP. And it sounds like that's going to play a very large role, that there are going to be a large number of them, potentially, to serve different needs, to serve different pieces of land. And I'm curious, I'm not familiar with other examples of places that have had such a large and complete build-out in this sort of form. And I'm wondering if you all have thought about that at all, about if there are examples that we might consider, and how you see this actually playing out in terms of implementation as you attempt to support the build-out through what's potentially a very large number of very diverse sort of RFPs.
I'm trying to think of an example. That's a good question. Let me do that if you don't mind, and I will get back to you. But it's not unusual for a district at this scale. Actually, I do know an example, but I only know the first phase that's been built out.
Daniel,
Yeah.
sorry, I can, while you're thinking of that, because you probably have a better example, but I think one of any planned community that has guiding principles and visions and either design guidelines or sustainability goals or road design standards, all of that stuff, any disposition of property kind of acts like an RFP, because the property's not going to be sold unless that developer can meet all of those standards that are part of the master plan. So this is different, to your point. It is a much more, it's more surgical, to be honest, and the RFP is a lot of leverage. So the city can actually be not playing off, but can be evaluating different proposals and even create a situation where they would take the best of both and say, no, actually, that's what we want. So I think it is more surgical, but I do think just conceptually, it's, Tierra Contenta, for example, that affordability goal of 40% was maintained through each sale, but it was considered on a whole. So if one developer said, hey, look, I can do a great 100% affordable project, nobody was telling them, oh, but you can only do 40% here, and the next developer might come along and say, hey, I can do great with the 20% inclusion, but this is my market rate product, slightly different. And if that market rate product met the overall goals for the project, then that could be accepted because they were still overall meeting the goals for the whole project, if that makes sense.
It does, and thank you for that. And I do like the idea of a planned community. I think there's a lot of potential here, but I also have a lot of concerns that it could be limiting, and it could be really hard to implement. And I want to make sure that we know that going in as we're thinking about the master planning of it, that it could be very difficult to get the diversity of ideas that you're hoping to get as responses to certain RFPs. That is my concern, and I don't think I have anything else right now.
If I may, I want to say I appreciate that question, and now I understand the question. One, I mentioned flexibility. The other one was this an ongoing request by people saying that they wanted to see more of an incremental development pattern. Same time, we also said, are we going to be able to get a master developer again? The good part about it is that the site's 64 acres. We know that there's a certain acreage that's going to go to the film expansion, but we could decide to, let's get out an RFP for 12 acres. Again, I'm making the number up, but the city can decide at various points, let's do a few more incremental, let's do a big 2 blocks over here. So they have those choices moving forward, and that's, again, I feel like we're in a good position because we control the property. We can make those choices along the way based on what the market seems, what seems viable within the marketplace.
Director Clue?
Chair, thank you. I'd just like to respond to Commissioner Pava's question regarding the link overlay. So just to clarify, so the Innovation Village legislation basically was attempting to replicate the link style zoning on larger parcels around town, 50 acres plus, for example. So I think it is analogous to the link, and therefore the Midtown, I think the difference in Midtown is, there's been deep community engagement, to create this community development plan, which, wasn't contemplated with the Innovation Village legislation. And then the Innovation Village legislation also was attempting to, change the approval process to make it more streamlined, to include more, administrative approvals versus planning commission approvals.
Commissioner Faulkner?
I have a question. With regard to the sale of the land, has the city contemplated doing kind of the formula they did with Tierra Contenta? Because I know with every sale they make in Tierra Contenta, a percentage of the sale goes back into the city's economic development and a couple of other funds. And I was just wondering, this may be a good way, if we thought about it similarly, this may be a good way to allow for some businesses to be in there where we could offset the cost of infrastructure, because it's hard to get low leasing in if the cost of the build-out is so expensive that the developer or whoever has to, charge a certain rental amount in order to get to kind of recoup what they've spent. And so I'm just wondering if that has been a consideration. I mean, it's worked for Tierra Contenta, and I just wonder if there's some potential here.
Alex, do you want to take it, and I can take it too?
That sounds good. Madam Chair, Commissioners, I think that's a really great question, and when the land economics team starts making their presentations, I think we'll understand a lot more where that potential is and how, because you're absolutely right. I mean, the city has a big debt right now, and we need to start by paying that off, hopefully. But there's so many other aspects, and I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I think that's really important that, there's going to be cross-subsidization, and there is going to be revenue, and we need to figure out where it goes and how to make the most of it. Do you have anything to add to that, Daniel?
I would only say that, the analysis right now is really looking at the main trunk lines that need to go in to support the development: water, electricity, sewer, and that's been the focus of the analysis. The economics will look at bringing those trunk lines in, either repairing and or new, and the land value is what we have to play with. We don't have a lot of cash in the city, so we'll be working around land value based on the type of use that's being proposed there, what we're requesting. So you're absolutely spot on as part of the way that we'll be analyzing the economics of development over time. But yeah, thanks for bringing it up, because I feel like that's where the rubber meets the road, if you will.
I just have one question, and that is there any projection as to how long this project is going to take?
Hopefully in my lifetime.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the commission, no, there's not. We all hope just as soon as the economy allows, as soon as local developers and builders and community groups get involved, we sure hope to see things happen fast.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can fairly, we can project right now, we want to get some RFPs out the door within the next few weeks, and then some for new development parcels. There are some parcels that have access to utilities, so that can happen within the next we can get the RFP, but probably not groundbreaking until 3, 4, 5 years from now. And then we have to build infrastructure, so that would be the next phase of development that we want to see. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of interest in Santa Fe. I think there's smart developers in Santa Fe and in the region. We just have to make sure that we write the right RFPs to get them incentivized to invest in Midtown.
Commissioner Lucero?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I haven't heard this come up yet, but right now there's two main entrances into that area. And I'm just wondering, and I don't know if this is too soon, but I'm just wondering, are there plans to open that up more so that there's more avenues to get into this property? I know that Franklin Miles Park's right there, and we're talking about accessibility, walkability, and I mean, this is something that I'd like to see certainly, but has that come up? And I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit about opening up. I mean, it's a former college campus, so it's contained, right? But opening that up so that there's more accessibility from the surrounding community.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner Lucero, yeah, absolutely, we've been looking at that. The land development plan, when you see it, proposes a number of outside road connections and other connections, I should say, or let's go back and restate it, connections. Some of them are envisioned as likely pedestrian and bicycle type connections only. Some of them are envisioned as initial pedestrian bike type connections that might turn into roads someday. All of it requires negotiating with other landowners. The city owns property, and as we were charged to do by the governing body, we are in negotiations with the state of New Mexico to do land swaps. That's why when you see the various land use applications associated with this master plan, we are also proposing rezoning and doing a general plan amendment on adjacent properties. So properties that are not actually included in the master plan, but we either own or intend to own once we negotiate a trade with the state. And some of those properties in question are intended to provide additional links. We have also reached out to adjacent property owners over a period of time. I'm not sure when some of the initial ones were. It was before I was on the project, but we have adjacent landowners who are interested and would like to talk more. So we are trying to do that, and the traffic management plan assessment that Wilson and Company did took those into account. The proposal is not reliant on additional road connections, but it will be better with those, and that's what we hope to achieve.
Okay, great, thanks. I'm just hoping that one of those partners is Santa Fe Public Schools with Milagro Middle School right there, and I can certainly see opportunities for, that school and Santa Fe Public Schools in general to benefit from this growth here, so. Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Faulkner?
So I'm just wondering, has this project been put on like the city's CIP list or ICIP list for the state to try and get funding through the state? I know there's like the North Central Economic Development, some board that a lot of the state legislators belong to. There's economic development funding there and some really low interest loans through that organization and the New Mexico Finance Authority. You can get loans at 1% to 2% regardless of what the market is doing. And if you prove that the development has shown to offer in-kind services of the value of the loan, the state will forgive the loan. So there's a lot of money at the state that may not just be through like traditional ICIP process of asking for just capital outlay. You can ask for NMFA loans that are low. You can ask for NMFA grants. You can ask for economic development grants, especially around infrastructure. I know through film there's a lot of grants available. And I'm just wondering if you're looking at, like, since the city's in debt and we have some economic hurdles to try to overcome, it may not be a bad idea to connect with the New Mexico Finance Authority. This is the kind of thing that they would be interested. Same with the North Central Economic Development Regional, I forget what the acronym is, but if you need any help contacting those people, I'm more than happy to help make the connection. But I think there's more resources at the state that could help with this project and with Los Alamos National Laboratories, because the laboratories are trying to decrease the number of facilities they're using in Los Alamos, and they're putting those into Santa Fe because that can connect Santa Fe with Sandia Labs, and it's called the Innovation Triangle, and I think that's what Dan was kind of alluding to. But it is something that is in the long-range planning for the labs, and they also have a foundation, and they're also willing to purchase land, and they're also willing to lease land. And in fact, they bid for the Midtown property because they thought they could fill the whole thing. And so I'm just wondering if we're looking outside of just city funding to any of these other bigger avenues to get money.
I can't see what Alexandra's doing, but yes. So again, part of the economic presentation is going to talk about creating an infrastructure within the city to be able to access, whether they're state or federal or both, financing sources, and aggregate them and make them also easier for developers to access them, who may not know who may not be aware that they exist. So yes. But I may want to follow up with you, though.
Commissioner Smith.
I have the sense it's time to move on, but I can't resist. In the same spirit, in my experience, and it's not been as a planning commissioner, but in other places and other times, the economic development phase of this can all of a sudden not be local, not employ local people, and it's going to be very successful, and I'm not arguing against what either Commissioner Pava or Commissioner Faulkner are saying, but I would simply say, when we're way downstream on this now, my background is community colleges. We have a superb community college here which knows how to do what you were talking about in your earlier proposal, and they know how to do it very well. However you handle it with them or others, having a process in place before you have a candidate, I think, would be having spoken. So you aren't running at the last moment to put together the right kind of, whether they're apprenticeships or internships or on-the-job training programs, or what will happen is the money will talk, and we'll look back, and there'll be a bunch of beautiful jobs there, but they will not, in general, have, like the economic development people, like mid-sized businesses, and in other places, those are businesses that employ more than 150 people, and they come with a program. So there's just a need to have a balance. If you're serious about the balance, you need to think ahead about it, from my experience.
Thank you, Commissioner, for those comments. We appreciate it.
But we have spent lots of time with Becky Rowley at the community college, and as well as folks from UNM. So, but this reinforcing is really helpful. It's affirming. So thank you.
Thank you for this presentation. It's been very informative, and I think we'll be spending a lot of time on this. Okay, let's move on to approval of findings and conclusions. The first one is case number 2022-5063, which is 2200 Old Pecos Trail, and it's the rezoning matter. Are there any changes or comments to the findings and conclusions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve. Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Who made the motion?
I did.
Thank you. Commissioner Lawrence?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith? Commissioner Faulkner?
Yes.
Commissioner Lucero?
Yes.
Commissioner Morondo?
Yes.
Commissioner Pava?
No.
Commissioner Toya?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
The next matter is case number 2022-5064, 2200 Old Pecos Trail, preliminary plat approval, and this is the findings and conclusions that have an amendment.
Madam Chair, I believe you already voted on this.
The preliminary plat?
I thought you voted on it when we told you there was an amendment.
That was presented as part of the agenda.
Okay, great.
I thought I made a mistake. So,
Motion to approve?
Second.
okay, I think we need to read the amendment into the record. Whoever made the, I mean, I have it here, so I could read it, but, okay. So item number 16 on the amended findings states that during the hearing, the applicant agreed to limit structures to one story. Based on that stipulation, the Planning Commission added a condition of approval, added that as a condition of approval, and requires that limitation to be placed as a note on the plat, and the note will limit the structures to one story. And who made the motion on that?
I did. Motion to approve
With the amendment?
as amended.
Point of order.
Yes.
Madam Chair, are we voting on the findings and conclusions that were already presented, and in addition, this particular additional restriction finding on the preliminary plat, or are we simply voting to add this condition to the findings and conclusions, and then there'll be a third vote on the preliminary plat?
No, this is, my understanding is that at least at the first hearing, the second hearing I wasn't present, but at the first hearing, the applicant stipulated that they would limit all construction to one story. So my understanding is that was a condition of approval, and therefore the findings were not adequate because they were not, that wasn't in there. So that finding is now added to the findings of facts and conditions of law, and we're just voting on the approval of those.
Second it. I'll second again.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Lawrence?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith? Commissioner Faulkner?
Yes.
Commissioner Lucero?
Yes.
Commissioner Morondo?
Yes.
Commissioner Pava?
No.
Commissioner Toya?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
The next matter is case number 2022-5203, which is 1840 Paseo de la Conquistadora subdivision. Are there any comments or any changes to those findings of facts and conclusions of law? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve. Second.
Melissa, could we have the vote, please?
Commissioner Lawrence?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith? Commissioner Faulkner?
Yes.
Commissioner Lucero?
Yes.
Commissioner Morondo?
Yes.
Commissioner Pava?
Yes.
Commissioner Toya?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Moving on to new business, we are taking up case number 2022-5621, which is 400 Buckner Road Development Plan.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. I will be presenting tonight in the place of our senior planner, Dan Escabel, who is away for a few weeks on a much-needed and much-deserved vacation. So he's prepared. He's done all the hard work for me, so I will just try to fill his shoes here tonight. So before us tonight is case 2022-5621. This is 4000 Beckner Road, a development plan for Lot 18 of the Los Solares Master Plan. Orion West, as the agent for Meridian Property Ventures, the owner, requests approval of the plan to construct a 95,000 square foot medical office. The property is a portion of the Los Solares Master Plan, consisting of approximately 18 acres of this site, and the property is zoned C2, general commercial, and within the suburban archaeological review district. Staff is recommending approval with the conditions of approval outlined in this report. And one motion will be required in this case: approve or deny the development plan subject to the conditions and technical corrections of the staff report. You can find the conditions of approval beginning on page 2 of the staff report. I do have one amendment to these conditions tonight that I'll read into the record. We are amending condition 12 here highlighted for you. We will amend the condition to read: to allow intensification of use along Beckner Road, the items described in the Beckner Road Extension Punch List dated July 1st, 2022 must be completed and accepted, or a final financial guarantee for those items must be in place prior to issuance of any building permit related to the project or property. And the main change here is, as you can see, changing this condition to specify the punch list and to change it from prior to recording of the development plan to prior of issuance of building permit. You can find technical corrections summarized in Exhibit A, and our development review team comments and corrections in Exhibit B of the packet material. I will state that the applicant has complied with pre-application conference, subsection Chapter 14, early neighborhood notification procedures, and all notice requirements to be heard here tonight. And further, our analysis finds that the applicant has addressed the necessary findings and approval criteria and conditions, and recommends that the development plan be approved, subject to the conditions of the report. So Figure 2 of the staff report shows the site from the ground here. The proposal is to develop a portion of Lot 18 in Los Solares. Lot 18 is approximately 49 acres. The applicant is proposing a lot split for Lot 18 and constructing the project on proposed Lot 18B. Actually, in your report, actually, it's another minor amendment. It's referenced as Lot 18A. But this proposed project will be built on the proposed Lot 18B. And this lot contains approximately 18 acres. The lot split is under administrative review at the Land Use Department and will be recorded concurrently with the development plan as approved. Figure 1 in your case packet shows the project site and aerial as sandwiched between Beckner Road to the north and to the south, I-25 there. Figure 3 identifies the current zoning and places the project site in a C2. You can see the larger Lot 18 site there designated as C2, and then the 18 acres of the project site there. To the north, you have the R12 zone Estancias de las Solares residential development. To the west, mixed-use current vacant property. And then past the vacant piece of Lot 18, a commercial shopping center zoned area that is currently vacant as well. And then, of course, Interstate 25 and county jurisdiction to the south. The applicant did submit a traffic impact analysis. The area study comprised of the following 7 intersections. First, at Beckner Road and Cerrillos. The second at Wellness Way and Cerrillos. The third, off to your right, Beckner Road and Richards. The fourth at Wellness Way and Beckner. The fifth at Rail Runner Road and Beckner. And then the sixth, on the site, we have Beckner Road and Walking Rain, and Beckner Road and the proposed driveway A into the property. In summary, the TIA concludes that the proposed development will have minimal adverse impact to the adjacent transportation system, and the applicant has addressed the city's traffic consultant, Wilson, all of their concerns identified in the staff report and Exhibit B. Figure 6 displays the proposed access and parking onto the site. The project would have 2 driveways providing ingress and egress. The first driveway is proposed off of Beckner Road and Walking Rain at the existing roundabout. The second access, which would be right in and right out, ingress, egress to the site, will be located to the west, directly off of Beckner on the north portion of the property there. The applicant is proposing 492 vehicular parking spaces, including 21 ADA parking spaces. This exceeds the required 446 parking spaces required by code. Also want to point out the bicycle parking. The development plan identifies bicycle parking at the front and rear of the building in the northwest and southeast of the building. The development plan shows that there are 12 bicycle parking racks. These racks can serve as 2 bikes apiece. So they're showing a total of 24 bicycle parking spaces on the development plan. Our code requires 12 total biking parking spaces, so they're in compliance here. Here's a slope gradient of the site. The site slopes down from the boundary with Interstate 25 towards Beckner Road. No portion of the property contains slope greater than 30%, and the proposed building site contains a natural slope of no greater than 20% as well. For stormwater management and detention, there are 3 drainage retention areas, detention areas, 1 located to the east of the buildings and 2 along the front of the property line adjacent to Beckner Road. Drainage flow has been designed to direct drainage into these areas, as you can see. And then with landscape and open space, the project requires 25% open space. The proposed lot 18B is approximately 18 acres or 784,080 square feet. Code requires 4.5 acres of open space. Due to the employment of passive water harvesting, they are allowed a 5% reduction to open space, resulting in a required 3.6 acres of open space. The development plan currently identifies 3.92 acres of open space, so in compliance above the 3.6 that is required. As you can see, the applicant proposes landscaping throughout the property. The applicant has projected a water budget of 8.89 acre-feet of water per year. The City Water Resources Division has not approved the water budget and has requested additional information. I know in communications with the applicant that they are continuing to work with the Water Department to make sure that they have the information they need to correctly evaluate the proposal. For utilities, the development proposes to connect to city services for water and sewer. The project is connecting a 6-inch water line to a 12-inch main off of Beckner Road, as well as a 6-inch sewer line to a 10-inch sewer line off of Beckner Road, and dry utilities were not addressed in the applicant's plans. For fire service and suppression, there is one existing fire hydrant along Beckner Road, and the proposal calls for 3 additional fire hydrants on the site. And also sprinklered, the buildings will be sprinklered, and all of the lanes, through the development will be fire lanes. You can see we kind of marked that out there. It's a little hard to see in the dark blue, but it follows through here. For trails and sidewalks, the applicant is proposing to construct part of the Los Solares Master Plan Trail segment along the rear property line that kind of runs along I-25. However, on this diagram, you can see their proposed trails are outlined in yellow, and we are conditioning that they expand the connections to the edge of the property line and construct the trail, through the whole width of the property. The City and Parks Trail Division requests an 8-foot wide asphalt path as well, with a 6-inch subgrade. The proposal of the developer had called for a crusher fines or gravel path, but City recommends asphalt for both accessibility and maintenance going forward. The development has integrated sidewalks throughout the development plan. You can see those in yellow as well on the plan here. And those sidewalks are shown to connect to the master plan trail as well along here and to the sidewalks along Beckner Road. The architecture proposed for the site fits in with the mix of single-story, multi-story Pueblo revival, and contemporary structures currently existing around the site. The proposed massing of the project, you can kind of see a rendering here at the center, is a 3-story contemporary style structure, and we find is compatible with the kind of existing architecture around the site. So staff has found that the approval criteria has been met and all development plan approval criteria as outlined in the staff report. And with that, I can take any questions. Thank you.
Any questions, clarifying questions from the commission? Commissioner Lucero?
Yes, I'm not super familiar with the Los Solares master plan, but this is in reference to item number 4, the 8-foot wide asphalt path. I'm a cyclist, and pet peeve is a path that goes nowhere. And so I'm just assuming that as other tracts of land get developed, that's part of the condition of building, is that they need to continue that path onward into the next site as they get developed. Is that what's?
Yeah, exactly, and that's why we want to make sure that they cover, the area that they're developing, even though it goes beyond the parking lot area. but that it extends to the property line, and so that when the next lot is developed, they match up with that trail.
Okay, and that is a condition, is that a recommendation, or is that a condition?
No, that, we conditioned that in the report, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Smith.
When I was reading the material, am I correct? I don't think you mentioned it, that the ENN was very positive and that the support of the neighborhood was pretty much unanimous?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Smith, that's my recollection of the meeting. The applicant may have more detail. I did attend, and I don't recall, much opposition or concerns raised, but we can, go into more detail with that, yeah.
And one other, is it, in terms of the need for the building, I'm assuming this is connected to the hospital somehow. Is there, or can we hear more about that? I mean, I know that's at best abridging what our role here is, but this is a great big building with a lot of parking lots. Where's the need?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Smith, yeah, I will, I'll defer that question to the applicant. I think they might be in a better position to speak to, who they're looking to fill this building and what use it might have in the future, so.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, we'll move, I'm sorry, Commissioner Miranda.
Hi, thank you, Commissioner. Just a question about the recommendation or requirement of going to asphalt for the path from the proposed crusher fines. Could you expand on that just a little bit? That you might know of what the dialogue was. Is it a requirement that it be asphalt in the code? Or, yeah.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Miranda, let me try to pull up the actual condition. So this is from Santa Fe, it's number 4 there. I think I have it up on the screen, sorry, you probably can't read it, but this is coming from Santa Fe Parks Division, and they are requesting that, the trail be constructed of asphalt with 6-inch subgrade and, the nice base material that you need to keep this trail in good working order for years to come. Because generally, for accessibility and maintenance on these trails, especially with the Parks Division being as strapped, for maintenance, the standardization of the trail system makes it easier for them to go out there and maintain it, going forward, so.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pava.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So when I read through and looked at the site plan, this shows that there's about 4.4% lot coverage. Yeah. I had to take a double take, so I did the calculation. I thought, no, surely it's 44. All I want to say as a statement is, getting back to the first presentation this evening, this is where this brings us. 90% of this lot is not in building. 90% of this lot, and probably 50 or 60% of this lot, is going to be asphalt. Keep doing what you're doing, and that's what you're going to be getting. There's nothing wrong with this site plan. It's a very pleasant-looking development. It's all functional. That's all I have to say.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Pava, when I was reviewing this report with Dan, I had that same comment. I said, wait, 4%? I was like, is that 40? So I understand. Thank you. Yeah.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move on to hear from the applicant.
Will you be the only one speaking, sir? Yes, please, if anybody will be speaking, if you could please rise, and I will swear all of you in at the same time. Please raise your right hands. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimonies you're about to give are the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you, and when you step to the podium, please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Is that good? Can everybody hear me okay? So Brian Nenninger, 530B Harple Road, Suite 100, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87505. Go ahead. Madam Chair, Clow, and Commissioners, my name is Brian Nenninger, and I'm with a company called Orion West, and I represent the applicant tonight for this medical office building in the Los Solares master plan. And apologize, I'm a little bit hoarse. Don't know why tonight, so bear with me. With me tonight, we have our civil engineering team that is Ron Bohannon and Vince Carica and Terry Brown, and Terry's the one that did the traffic study for us, and they'll be available during the question and answer period if we have specific questions about that item. We also have on the Zoom tonight with us Robert Doan, who's the architect on this project, and he can answer questions around that. We have our land use attorney, Frank Herdman, and then finally we also have, well, I shouldn't miss Joni Miller, who's one of my associates in my company, and then finally we are also happy to have the owner and developer, Meridian, and Mike Kahn, who's a principal and the chief development officer, and Indrajit Obesekar, who is also a vice president for Meridian. So with that, I'm going to just for 1 second walk away from the podium and let Mike Kahn introduce you to who Meridian is as a developer and an owner of medical offices, and then I'll come back and get into the details of the project. Thank you.
Mike Kahn, address 2121 North California Boulevard, Walnut Creek, California, 94596. Hey, good evening. Thank you. Madam Chair, Commissioners, City of Santa Fe staff, thank you so much for helping get our project over the line and get on the agenda tonight. We very much appreciate it. My name is Mike Kahn. I'm Principal and Chief Development Officer with Meridian, representing the applicant and developer for the project. Meridian's a full-service real estate owner, operator, investor, and developer of healthcare real estate. We're based in Northern California. We have regional offices in Seattle, Utah, Phoenix, Southern California, and Dallas. Meridian has extensive experience designing, entitling, and building medical facilities throughout the western United States. We've developed over 3 million square feet over the last decade for some of the preeminent healthcare systems in the country. Some of our clients include Banner Health, Tucson Medical Center, Cornerstone Behavioral Health, John Muir, Northwest Medical Center, Community Health Systems, Hospital Corporations of America, Simon Med, Kaiser Permanente, Stanford Healthcare, Sutter Health, UCSF Health, Providence, and DaVita Dialysis. The Meridian team of experienced professionals provides comprehensive building solutions to meet the goals of its clients, in conjunction with the planning and development guidelines imposed by our constituent communities. The uses for this project are permitted by right in the zoning and requires no variances from the zoning code. The building is envisioned to have a variety of multi-specialty medical providers, including but not limited to internal medicine, surgical specialists, radiation oncology, medical oncology, infusion, general surgery, urology, orthopedics, radiology imaging, dental, cardiology, OBGYN, lab, pharmacy, nephrology, rheumatology, neurology, pulmonary and gastroenterology. At this time, I'd like to turn the presentation back over to Ryan Manager with Ryan West to talk a little bit more about the project in detail. We thank you for the opportunity to present tonight, and we look forward to a successful project and bringing much-needed healthcare services to the community. We are very excited to be part of the Santa Fe community. Thank you very much. I turn it back over to Brian.
Let me see if I can make this a little bit larger so it's easier maybe to see. A little bit different view than I'm used to. Oh, you guys, can you see this? Okay, I think we'll move on. I won't take up too much more of your time. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to do is get you all familiar with the area. As you can see on this particular slide, this is in the Los Solares master plan, and the green area is the site, approximately 18 acres, and that's 4,000 Beckner Road. And then if you kind of look around, and I think my cursor here will work, so we kind of look at what's happening. Obviously, there are other medical uses, thinking about Commissioner Smith's comment. The hospital, of course, being the largest medical use that's there. Presbyterian Medical Services, which is now under construction, and then the VA clinic, which is over here next to the Cielo luxury living apartments. There's also the Solaris Senior Center. I just mentioned Cielo, which is a multifamily project. And then we have, of course, the residential neighborhoods basically to the north of Beckner. So the yellow area is the area that was built up by Pulte, and that's the Estancias de Las Solares. And then currently just starting construction, I'm sure this probably came before this group, is the D.R. Horton development, which is Vistas del Sierra. So one of the things I would like to kind of just go over again, and Maggie did this in her staff report as well, is just the zoning. Because as you all know, Los Solares was truly a mixed use master plan. It contemplated everything from commercial to residential, multifamily, a single house or single home, and shopping centers, as well as commercial developments of various types, including medical office. So just to kind of let you all, kind of reacquaint everyone to this, pretty much to the south of Beckner Road is where the heavier, more commercial uses were planned and intended. And you can see this from the zoning. So we have C1, C2, C1, Business Industrial Park, MU, C2, C2, Shopping Center. So that's kind of in line with the uses for the master plan. Very little has happened south of Beckner, except, of course, we mentioned Presbyterian Medical Services, the apartments, the Cielo Vista, and then the VA. So we're among kind of the early arrivers in terms of developing here. So as we look at, again, just kind of a blow-up, we've been looking at this from a little bit further away, just trying to show the site plan in context with, again, what's happening around it. So one of the questions that came up was the trail system. I think it's a great question. And if you take it all the way to Richards and look what's happening with the home-wise development there, you'll see this trail on the east side of Richards, and it's intended to go all the way along I-25, almost all the way down to Cerrillos. So we'll be one of the first groups to actually put in that section of the trail. It is currently a trail to nowhere, but it won't be for long, we hope. So the other thing I would say is that we, of course, have no issue with the condition to go ahead and extend that trail across the entirety of this site from property line to property line. Just a couple of quick comments. So we do have two curb cuts. The one is at the roundabout at Walking Range. It's what I would call a full-service entrance. It's all ways in and all ways out. And when we look at the second curb cut, which is just a little bit down from Beckner Road, that is a right in and right out only. The other thing I point out, and to Commissioner Pava's earlier statement, you see the purple. The purple is actually the roofed area. This is the building footprint. And compared to the entire site, it seems rather small. I suppose there's maybe some goodness in that we didn't build a bigger building, but we did build what we needed for our needs. But I think it's a point well taken, and I want to comment on a few things, and I'm going to repeat a few of these things as we go in different diagrams and reference material. But one of the things that we really tried to do, because we were sensitive about the sea of parking, is from the Beckner Road approach, we tried to limit that parking while still managing to get this closest point of the building to Beckner over 190 feet off of the road, and then locate our detention basins along Beckner with some nice landscape and screening, so that when you're driving along Beckner, you don't get the feeling that you're looking at a Walmart parking lot. That was definitely something we did not want. One of the challenges that we have as a medical office building is, the typical 5 per 1,000, and we're just a little bit over that, is actually tight for this kind of development. A medical office has a lot of people coming and going. So the other thing I would point out here is that on the back side of the property, where we have more of the parking, we are buffered somewhat by 25 through the green space that's 100 feet in width. And of course, the hiking trails, there's a little bit of berming that's happening here. And again, landscape all along that parking lot. The other thing that I'll point out, and you might have noticed, and we'll see it in these renderings, is that the building on the I-25 side, so the I-25 view corridor presents as a 2-story building. Even though it is 3-story, it presents as 2 on that side, and I'll show you how that's done here in a moment. Okay, so just quickly, you know what the project is. 18 plus minus acres within the Los Solares Master Development Plan. The city of Santa Fe has confirmed the zoning is general commercial C2. We've also seen that on the maps. And medical office use is permitted by right within C2 districts. The allowable building height is 45 feet. So we're proposing 95,000 square feet. It's a 3-story building. The building height will be no higher than the allowed 45 feet. And as you noted in Maggie's presentation, 92 parking spaces are provided, and 446 are required. So just a little bit more than 5 per 1,000. As we look at the development plan, one of the things I'd like to point out is we are trying to address staff comments as quick as we can. The sidewalk moves all the way along Beckner, the entire length of the property. So that sidewalk to the south of Beckner does not exist today, except for a few areas around the roundabout. And then as we look at the hike and bike trail, we've extended that and are fine and agree to the condition around the 8 feet and the asphalt, understanding what the city is trying to achieve with that. So looking a little bit at the building facade, a little bit about the architecture. So not going into too many details, the architecture is contemporary in style, not unlike or foreign to what was done with Presbyterian Hospital or Presbyterian Medical Center currently being built, or the VA Medical Services. If there's a reference to the Santa Fe style, it's going to be Pueblo, as you can see, with the size of the windows, with the way the massing is set up, and the coloration on the building facade. The architecture has met the point system for this Santa Fe City Code. Now, one of the things that I want to point out is that this view, looking northwest, would be what you would see from the I-25 corridor. Now, obviously, it's a little different. We're a lot closer to the building here, but this is looking northwest. So you're to the south on the site. And if you note, there's quite a drop here, and this is a bermed, sloped area that's nicely landscaped that is 1 story higher than the front of the building. So it presents as a 2-story building. So this is what I was saying, from the I-25 corridor, it presents as 2 stories. Okay. One other thing I want to point out, because as we look at the site on Beckner, and you can see how we're screening and working with the parking lot, and I'll come back to another drawing if I need to, but the views, I want to contemplate the views within this area. Primarily, they're the Sangre de Cristo to the east, to the north, and then to the west, the Hamus. This building is not interfering with any of those views for the neighborhood to the north on Beckner. Just wanted to kind of point that out. If you were looking for views to the south, well, the way the topography is such, you would not be able to see the Ortiz Mountains regardless. Okay, so just looking a little bit at our landscaping plan, and I'll just point out that this section is a good one because it again shows how we're stepping down to the building, and by using an effective use of the current slopes and circumstance, presenting the building as 2 stories from the I-25 corridor. We are using, as Maggie said, passive water harvesting, and that passive harvesting is primarily in all of these wells in the parking lot that will be helping mitigate some of the water requirements for the trees and shrubs in those areas. We also are using passive harvesting in this area where my cursor is here to the right around this detention pond, and then the same thing with the front of the parking lot and back into those detention areas. Of course, we're planting drought-tolerant shrubs and trees, and in keeping with what the planning list is for the city of Santa Fe. And of course, we contemplate areas for outdoor seating and gathering as being designed in, which for folks that maybe there as a patient might be a nice thing, or people visiting or with patients might be a nice thing while they're waiting. Oops, a little bit too fast there. So I want to talk really quickly about open space, and Maggie had mentioned this a little bit too. So the way that the open space is calculated in this case is that based on the 20% requirement and the 18 acres, we're significantly over. So 554,000 is provided, only 157,000 roughly square feet is required at 20%. If we ramp that up to the 25, it'd still be well under at 196, 347. But I just thought that it also might be interesting to look at the building area, just because we're not trying to fudge or use the fact that this is what we're building. Even the building area itself is responsible in that regard, and that 171,055 square feet would be provided when you just look at this boundary. So just between the 2 drives, and in that case, 80,000 would be required at 20%, at 25% it'd be 100,000. So just thought I'd throw that in there. So again, the size and scale of the building for the site is reasonable when you look at the availability of the land that we could have developed on or could have spread that building out on. Just a couple of sites, design benefits that we probably talked about, we'll reiterate. So again, I just wanted to confirm that the nearest point from Beckner to the nearest point on the building on that south side is at least 190 feet. It goes more as you move across Beckner to the west. The parking is set back and screened from Beckner Road. The project will complete, of course, the sidewalk on the south side of Beckner Road within the property line, and the project will be the first to build a portion of this envisioned Los Solares Trails system on the south side of the site. And then finally, the project provides ample open space beyond the city of Santa Fe's requirements, and this points to a building footprint that we feel is reasonable for the site. Okay, closing thoughts. So the city, we're thankful, first of all, to the city staff for working with us to get through this process, and we appreciate that they fully support the project. As we said before, the project proposal, as designed and submitted, including the uses, meets the Santa Fe City Code for C2 districts, and the project is aligned in both spirit and letter with the Los Solares master plan. We're not asking for any variances tonight in the development of this project. And finally, we agree with all the staff proposed conditions, and will comply with those, including revised condition 12. So at this point, we're happy to stand for questions.
Questions from the commission? Commissioner Pava?
Yeah, Thank you, Madam Chair. I noticed during Mr. Kahn's presentation, the phrase radiation oncology among included but not, could include among the many specialties. I'm not sure if I saw floor plans in the applicant submittals. Maybe there were. I might have missed them. Is there at this time any contemplation of anything like a LINAC in this building for so-called cancer center?
So the answer to that question is yes. And if we look at this closest plan, this particular drawing has accommodation for such a facility if that is warranted.
Thank you. I think that's important to state for the record that what I heard you say, Brian, was that there is an indication for a LINAC type facility for radiation oncology. This could mean that there would be some kind of a cancer center for treatment of oncological conditions.
As contemplated in the uses at this point, that is one potential use.
And it's fine. It's a C2 zone. I just find it very interesting for the record that we just reviewed a case from another medical facility for a cancer center, and it's rather controversial, and I just want to put that out there in the record that this building seems to have a potentially competing business.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Commissioner Bava.
Commissioner Morondo?
Was a marketing study done to arrive at the size of this building?
The answer to that is yes, and I can defer if there's more detail needed back to the ownership team, but it is. I think one of the things that I would say is if you looked at one of the earlier presentations and they showed you the exponential curve with the growth of population in Santa Fe, I think that might tell you, a little bit about what's going on in the world here. There's a demand for everything as the city grows, including medical services.
I'm right that there wasn't any reference to the study in the packet particularly. Did I?
There would not have been, no, sir.
Was the idea of pervious paving at all discussed in the development of the site plan?
We did have a little bit of discussion of that around one of the fire lane access areas that was in the detention pond to the west. I think that is still to be determined and under discussion, but let me go to that location. So if you look at this area right here, that is by requirement a 26-foot wide fire lane, and this is one of the areas that we have that under discussion.
I appreciate the passive water harvesting and the site plan in general, hiding the parking in the back. Great. I just always think when you have this much asphalt, if some of that, particularly that would be identified as perhaps overflow parking, it just makes that less water having to go into a huge retention pond, right?
That is a good point that we can take back. One of the things that I wanted to point out is that, these retention ponds are sized, of course, to handle all the paving that you see here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rondo.
Any other questions? Commissioner Smith?
In Mr. Kahn's presentation, he talked about Banner and Stanford and clients. Do you have any clients for this building, or is it speculative?
Right now, this building is speculative at this point. There is certainly, I'm not privy to everything that's happening, but at this point, it is speculative.
If there are no other questions, I'll entertain a motion. I'm sorry. Public hearing. There's no one here.
Madam Chair, I'll sit down, of course, but if there are comments, and I would like to request time to rebut it if needed, if it's helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll open up the public hearing portion. Anyone here from the public? Anyone on Zoom?
If there's anyone who is on Zoom who wants to speak, please raise your hand. There's not anyone with their hand raised currently.
As there's no one here from the public to speak, and as there's no one on Zoom with their hand raised, we'll close the public portion of the meeting. And are there any other questions or comments by the commission? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Baba.
Thank you. In the matter of case 2022-5621, 4,000 Beckner Road, that's not right, as it is, Beckner Road Development Plan, Orion West, so on and so forth. Motion for approval based on the recommendation, motion to approve the development plan, subject to conditions of approval and technical corrections recommended by staff, and condition number 12 amended by staff at the hearing.
Second.
Commissioner Lucero seconded.
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Yes. Commissioner Lawrence?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith? Commissioner Faulkner?
Yes.
Commissioner Lucero?
Yes.
Commissioner Morondo? Commissioner Pava?
Yes.
Commissioner Toya?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on. Any matters from staff?
Madam Chair, thank you, members of the commission. I did wanted to give a few updates from some notes from previous meetings. For the October 6th meeting of the Planning Commission, we have Jesse Roach from the Water Division who's going to be giving a presentation for the Planning Commission. In November, we're looking at holding a meeting tentatively in the south side at Cesar Chavez Elementary School. We looked into the Southside Library, and they'll be holding early voting on November 3rd. I know, it's hard to imagine, but yes, it's coming up. And so I'm going to be doing some site visits and some things over the next week or so, and should have confirmation at the October meeting of what we're planning on doing for November. I do want to let you know that we are inching closer to a signed contract on the Chapter 14 code development, code update. So that is hopefully, again, in a month's time, I'll have that signed and ready to go. We also are moving on the general plan process. We're holding and scheduling more internal meetings with city leadership and executive staff. We're working on a survey that we will send out to members of the Planning Commission, other elected officials, and leadership to just start to get some initial feedback on the general plan as it is and what we would like to be seeing going forward in the update. And that will also, help us inform, what that RFP looks like as well. So. And then I also did want to note, Commissioner Pava reached out and said that the New Mexico APA has a reduced rate or a discounted rate for public officials, $60, I believe, for that New Mexico APA conference that's coming up at the end of October. It's going to be held in Albuquerque. And, staff certainly recommends, if any commissioners are able to attend that. We do have a number of staff going as well to participate in that meeting down there. So that was all I had on my list for tonight.
Can you send us information on the APA conference?
I will, yeah. Thank you.
Anything from the commission? Commissioner Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to wonder if I can get a copy of Mr. Hernandez's presentation on the Midtown development.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Lucero, I do have a copy of that, and I can share it with you all.
Commissioner Faulkner.
I just wanted to update the full commission on some of the things that the policy subcommittee is working on. Right now, I think the most significant thing we're working on is we're working with Councilors Worth and Cassett to develop possibly a new E&M process, or we're in the midst of reviewing it and kind of identifying what we might want to revisit or change possibly. I don't think we have a direction necessarily right now, but we have started that process. We have a working document that staff and the policy subcommittee are working on. Some of the other initiatives are cannabis, consumption will probably come up, the Innovation Village, review of that will probably come up. What else, Jason? There's something else. I still have COVID brain. Anyway, those are some of the things we're working on. And so, oh yes, the general plan, looking at the RFP and working through some of that. Is there anything any of the other members can think of that I'm missing here? And nothing. So we're making progress on some things, it looks like.
Yes, Commissioner Smith.
This may not be the right forum and whatever, but I made a valiant effort this week to understand the CAPER plan on affordable housing, and have to confess that it's a blizzard of noise and data, and I'm wondering if we could get, at some point where we have 15 minutes on the agenda, somebody to come and sort it out. Because I think they're using the same data 17 times in 17 different ways to say the same thing. But if we're going to be serious about affordable housing, I need to understand what the hell happened last year so I can know something about what we might want to have happen next year. Yeah, briefing for dummies. Whenever we have time.
Yes, Jason.
Madam Chair, thank you. Just to elaborate a little bit on Commissioner Faulkner's discussion about the policy subcommittee work we're doing there. So, we do have the land development code update coming up, and part of phase 2 will be to, undertake, strategic changes to the code. For example, addressing the development plan process, for example. Anyway, big picture structural changes. And so we really, we've been working with that committee, and we want to, continue to work with them to help in the background to, process some of these large bore initiatives that will involve, major changes to the code in phase 2. And we have about I'm guessing like a year and a half to do that, more or less. And so, yeah, just to, another couple, I think, yeah, Pilar talked about Commissioner Faulkner talked about the E&N community engagement process. We want to, get going on that, and that will be integral to the, phase 2 of the land development code. And then, yeah, potentially cannabis consumption. One other big one is an outdoor dining ordinance. I think we want to do that. And then obviously just to, help with the processing, and, as stakeholders on the general plan update and the code update in general. So there will be some of these more, large bore initiatives, so to speak, that we will, request, the help from the policy subcommittee as we move forward. So there will be, more to come, basically.
Just to follow up a little bit on what Jason was saying, There is potential on the policy committee that as we take on different issues, as chair, I might rotate people out of the committee and rotate other members onto the committee, given their background or expertise. So anyone who's interested in any of these topics and feels like they have some background that could help, we can only keep 4 members on there, but I think we can give everybody a shot at being on that committee who wants to be involved in the different issues.
Any other comments?
Que viva la fiesta y que viva la zozobra.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? We're done.